And good afternoon to all my patron supporters. This is the last part of an interview that I did with Danny King from Deep South Homestead, where we talked about the dangers of 5G as a crowd control device, as well as my Solar Cycle 25 prediction and some practical information on the most important things you're going to need to take with you as we move forward: food, water, and warmth. Some more pioneering lifestyle and canning suggestions, but the full court press is on right now to try to limit anything that we are talking about the climate that's not related to CO2. And I know you're going to appreciate the information that you take away from this talk. Thank you for your support, and I'll keep bringing you more solid suggestions and information as we move forward. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm with Danny King. You already know his channel, Deep South Homestead, but did you know he had a website too, deepsouthhomestead.com? You know the YouTube channel, but inside there's an enormous amount of resources to dig into with educational videos. There's also an enormous amount of images about the farm, what kind of produce, vegetables they're growing, the greenhouse off the back, which you can do also on your house. If you have some wood and some different, you could use regular plastics, laminated plastics, high-tech plastics, whatever it is, to create a greenhouse that's coming off your actual structure. It's a wealth of information.
Yeah, well, you mentioned there 5G. I see, well, from what I've been able to figure out about 5G, let me put it that way. I'm not a genius, but in my training that I've been through and different things like that is more about mind control than it is anything else. It's I know that it's been used in different maneuvers and militarily, stuff like that. And I've noticed some of my research has showed me that only a couple of things really stop 5G, and that's just dirt. You know, dirt. A lot of dirt on the ground can stop 5G. Thick evergreens can stop 5G, and if you want to call it that, wet stuff. You know, I'm noticing we have lots of our subscribers is telling us here in the U.S., especially in mountainous regions, that they're going through cutting down tons of the evergreens everywhere in the mountainous regions, and the ones that they're not cutting down are actually dying from some type of disease that's actually happening now. And I do believe that that's on purpose. I'm not going to say that it's not. But my thing, David, and I haven't found this out yet, and if you have some information on this, it would be really appreciative. Is 5G going to affect our garden plants and their ability to be able to produce food for ourselves? Now, that's something that I haven't been able to find out. Do you know anything personally about that end of 5G?
I do a little bit. It depends on the proximity to the towers. And when I say towers, I'm not talking about the big ones that you're used to now, because they've already programmed in our mind a tower. So you think a tower, I see one, I'll drive 25 or 30 miles, I'll see another one on a hill over there, big giant thing. So they've already pre-programmed it. So when they say they're going to put out 5G cell towers, you're already thinking the one main that has all those different dishes on it. And they're not going to, it's only one big one, it's okay. But they're going to be putting them every 1,000 feet approximately, because this grid, it's running at such a high frequency that it doesn't carry as far, so they need the transmissions much closer than they were. But a lot of it's operating on the sub-gigahertz frequency anyway, so right around, was that 858, somewhere around there, but that's military, exactly like you just said. But what they found when they put up a tower somewhere, the vegetation all around it gets fried right away. Like they notice a darkening and a browning on it within the first weeks of those things going live. And it's real interesting. The front side of the plants will be damaged, but the back side of the plant won't. It's almost like it's being scorch burned on one side from electromagnetic radiation or whatever you want to call it. Could be a combination. The sun's behaving strangely. What if it's a combination of that plus increased UVB or some kind of UV changes, and you're getting a combination of both? Whatever happens, when they put one of those in vegetation, it's quickly damaged and it doesn't grow. Now, would they put it right in the center of your garden? I know in England right now, this is the problem they're having is these towers have eminent domain right of way. And what a court case is actually in London right now. This family, they had like a 100-year-old tree on their property, and in London they're like, no, we need your tree's in the way of the line of sight for the tower, and they're like, we need to cut your 100-year-old tree down out of your own private property, and they're like, no, you're not. They're like, you have to because it's blocking the right of way off the tower. So what they've gone through, and John Kitson, who runs 5G awareness down in the UK, down out of Totnes, he was saying they cut over 1 million trees in the cities this year to try to get this 5G right away, line of sight thing. And he was saying they're like 120, 150-year-old trees down some of the old brownstone buildings in the entire city, cut over these giant trees. And he was saying the most deforestation was taking place across all the railroad, because you got to realize they were smart back in the 1850s and 60s. They understood when you took a train down, there was fly ash coming out. Coal dust. Hey, let's put trees along the tracks to keep the air clean. So in the next fields. So some of the oldest growth trees in the UK are along the railroad lines because they were all planted around that same time in the 1850s, 60s, 70s. They're super gigantic trees now. They're going through, they deforested over 1 million of those super old growth trees just because they need the 5G. The trains are going to run on 5G. Line of sight's impacted by that. Now, in the countryside, they're also finding the same thing. Wherever they put these towers up, the vegetation, fruit trees right now is what they're noticing. But I'm sure it won't take long before the ground types, what we're talking about, the gardens will be some sort of effect where people will start putting it together. Because right now, what they're focusing is on the tree damage, the tree deforestation. Nobody's really focusing on vegetables as of yet. That's a good one. I should get those guys down there in the UK because they're the ones, like Sasha Stone and Mark Steele, those guys are the ones who are studying the effects of this electromagnetic radiation on human, plant, and animal effects. And they're finding this is just some bad news stuff here. This is bad stuff coming out. This is an extinction level kind of technology put into the wrong hands, because at the gigahertz frequency going up to 300 gigahertz plus, that is so far off the scale of anything that we've been. That's into actually fracturing cells and DNA damage if they focus that thing at you. If you're in the grid within the city, your cellular structure is being damaged just from especially when they go over 40 gigahertz. They're talking run at this thing as high as 300 gigahertz. That's insanity. Whoa. That's actually the best way I can try to explain it is trying to break through the construct of what this dimensional level is when you get to that high. I mean, you talk about CERN running their Hadron Collider experiments. Well, this is just the same thing, but on a different frequency level. Electricity is one thing. Electromagnetic radiation is a different one. But when they're pushing it to these absurd levels, never, ever seen before on our planet this level, ever. This is the high. When you go above 300 gigahertz pushing something like this, it's the highest ever on our planet that's ever been. So what kind of effects will this have on our vegetation? And maybe I rambled too much there, but that's kind of the info I got from going to the UK. And I never heard any of this in the US. In the UK, they are terrified of this technology. They do not want it. The Totnes, 100% of their city council voted to install zero. Like, it doesn't come to our county. It doesn't come to our city. And they passed massive resolution after massive resolution. Thousands, 20,000 people out of a town of 30,000 people coming out to say it doesn't come in our neighborhoods. It doesn't come in our city. Massive support like this from the community, and the UK government walked over and go, boom, no, you don't. It's going in. You don't have anything to say. And this is where it woke people up around Totnes is, wait a second. 3 out of 4 people in the entire city came together and voted and said no. All the politicians say no, this thing doesn't come in. And then the UK government overrode them and go, yeah, it is. We're going to stick a tower right there. And that really, wow. There's a lot of animosity right now. And what it did was it woke a lot of people up to, you have no vote. You have no right. You're a serf. That's it. Do what we say. Your vote doesn't count. Your voice doesn't count. Our companies are going to do what the governments tell them to do, or vice versa. The company tells the government puts it in. If you don't like it, now they're going to try to station military and police forces next to the towers because a couple of them have been damaged when they were installed. Imagine that. But anyway, I'll keep rambling on this 5G thing. Irks me, and I don't want it around me either. I really don't want it around me. I don't want it around me, my family, a farm, anywhere we're growing thing. You don't want it around you. You don't really. The stuff I saw, weaponized frequency. And if they get into this, it goes way beyond what, I'm going to choose my words carefully here. It can be used to transmit communications, but it can well be used to control crowds, and very well it can be used as a if you triangulate off of street lights and put that thing in, you could use it as a guided frequency weapon to cause strokes and heart attacks, targeted off street lights that are running on the 5G too. So this is where it gets into la la land, where there's many applications to this they're not telling you about. Get a faster movie download, but they don't tell you they can target you on a. It's crazy what's happening with this technology. It's scary. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Danny. I'm done with my ramble.
Oh, well, that's what I'm believing here in the United States, where we're at, is that's where it's actually headed toward, because what they're targeting the younger generation and a lot of the older generation now, I'm noticing, is newer phones, faster downloads, more movies. You can do all this stuff with 5G technology. Man, it is the most wonderful thing in the world. And because our society here in the U.S. has become so, I'm going to use the word soft, has become so soft, they're willing to just give in to anything, as long as it's for pleasure. I mean, David, it reminds me of the Roman Empire and a lot of the other empires that have fallen before them. Everything was about sports. It was about pleasure. It was about anything that hyped the soul up. Anything that excited the soul. I mean, yeah, let's do this. Let's throw a man in the cage and watch him get tore up by animals or whatever. Let's do this because it excited the soul. People were into entertainment more than anything else. We've learned this on our YouTube channel. Lots of people's YouTube channels have just blown it out of the water, and hey, I'm happy for them. If they make it, hey, I'm great. If that's what you can do and that's what people want, that's fine. We sit back. Ours grows at a very level, steady pace. We don't go from having a few subscribers to having 100,000 in just a few months, because we're not about entertainment. People today are more about entertainment than they are about anything else. I talked to the president of a bank, and he told me, he said, Danny, I will loan people money to buy a four-wheeler or to buy a boat or to go on a vacation before I will loan them money to buy a house, because people will pay for their recreation and they will not pay for their home. And that's where we're headed. This 5G technology, the people of our country are being sucked into this through entertainment, not even thinking about the ramifications that you just described about the molecular structure of the body being actually broken down by the transmitting this thing is doing through the electromagnetic currents and different things that it's putting out. And I'm really concerned for the future generations. I'll be honest with you. That's the reason I use 2022 as a tipping point for me. Is I look at a lot of the magnetic pole flips in the Earth that's actually on the verge of happening. I've looked at solar cycle 24, solar cycle 25. They're saying now that some of the solar flares that are coming out are not negative positive, they're positive negative, which is showing a direct sign that solar cycle 25 is ready to begin. And the effects from that, we don't even know yet. We just have some guesses. This is about how many sunspots we're going to actually have during that time. All this stuff is, what's the word I want to use, is climaxing on us all at once, and it's about to come to fruition. I'm afraid that so many people are going to be blindsided. And when I studied martial arts many, many years ago and took survival training, different things like that, the one element that gets you further and faster than anything else is the element of surprise. When you come in and you use the element of surprise, it usually gets you the victory. And when people have something thrown at them all at once and they are shocked, it's at that moment that people can step in and they can say, well, martial law is best for you at this point, because we can take care of you. And people at that time don't know how to think. That's why it's so important to get your head on your shoulders now and to get your stuff in order now. Get your food in order now. Decide at this moment who you're going to help and who you're not going to help. Decide right now what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. Make the decision now before it's dumped into your lap, because when it's dumped on you, you will make the wrong decision, I will assure you.
Yeah, you'll come at it numb and in fear, and that's not a good way to be. And that's kind of the reason I do my channel, is to try to bring this out so you understand why it's happening. So when it does happen, you don't come at it with fear. You go, oh, I understand the mechanisms. Awesome. What's next? And it should be like that. It shouldn't be like, oh, what's next? I'm going to make the Adapt 2030 Solar Cycle 25 sunspot call right here. 50 sunspots or less average for the entire cycle. You know, you might
50.
laugh and scoff at that. I'm saying 50 or less. Well, plus or minus 10. Like if NASA and ESA and everybody else can give plus or minus 10, then you give me plus or minus 10. 50, average plus or minus 10 for the entire cycle. They're all calling it 125. I've seen some crazy like 150, 130. Are you insane? Really? Can you look at the way our sun is stepping down on a long-term cycle going over the last 5 or 6 solar cycles? It's not going to go down, and then they're like, oh, it's suddenly going to jump back up, and then it might go down after a solar cycle 26. I mean, you got to look at the original forecast from the people who have definitely changed their tune over the last few years, whether by threat or coercion. But the original, what people were talking about, is very, very different what they're publicly stating now. I am so glad I started following some of these same people 3, 4, 5 years ago, before, you know, the grand solar minimum really got taken off and they were more free to talk, and, you know, you grab that info. But look for that info now. It's not out there anymore. It's all been scrubbed and replaced with the new, updated, whatever it is. So I'm still going to stay. The global awakening, or awareness of most people's cognitive, like, hey, something's really wrong and it's not CO2. And then the awareness is building in 2021, I would say, well into the 15 to 20% global range at that point. And again, like as we move down through the successive years, that number is going to grow larger. But what's going to shock people is all these solar forecasters from NASA and ESA and Independence and all these other names that you might have heard of. They're in a list of 30, 40 deep. They were all wrong last solar cycle too. The only person who was pretty much on the money was Dr. Abutsamatov from the Pulkovo Observatory, Valentina Zarkova, and John Casey. Now for those 3, I'm sticking with what they were calling for this solar cycle originally when they did their first forecast years ago. I'm going to stick with all of them and say 50 sunspots or less. It's not going to be said. It's not going to be 95. It's not going to be 120. Now, where is it going to make them look when a guy like me calls in and we go through? Now, you're talking about a few sunspots starting now. Yeah, there are going to be sunspots through solar cycle 25. There'll be some even through solar cycle 26 when we're way down in a Maunder minimum type thing. But the way this solar cycle is starting off, it's already like 8 months too late from what the experts told us we were going to kick off. We've seen what, like one sunspot. So the last count, for those of you who are doing the counting, there's 2 different metrics that we can measure here. The first one was the number of days in a row where there were 0 sunspots. And this last clip here got us 40 days in a row. And if you look back at how many times there's been 40 days in a row with no sunspots, is like one run, if you will. And then there was a few sunspots, so now we need to start that measurement at 0 day again. But 40 in a row brings us back in, what, like 1913? And then when you look at the actual, the day with no sunspots, 277 days this year so far, which brings us right back to 1901. So if we were supposed to have increasing or equal solar activity to this prior cycle, we should not be down at 1901 already. We should be should have been off the bottom and heading back up into some activity. So something's very wrong in the forecast. I'm saying it's more about the stability and the perception of stability until the very last second when it's no longer stable. They're going to string everybody along, and they're going to keep filling these supermarkets with, like you say, one product deep. Look behind there, there's nothing, until the very last second when there's actually going to be nothing left. And then, this whole controlled demolition of the economy to lock everybody down. Use the same timelines we're talking about, because it all fits in the exact same timeline. Now, this economic collapse, no, I'm not going to say collapse, I'm going to purposeful implosion. I'm not really sure when that's going to occur, but I can give you a sort of a time by date. A year before, if that happens, you have 1 year left before there's definitely not enough food to feed everybody, because that's what they're going to do it, is to lock you down so you can't go move. So anyway, our timelines are matching pretty much here on a lot of things. So interesting on that.
Yes, I'm in agreement with you 100% on that, because I watch the sunspots and different things like that occurring, and I just try to come to my own conclusion, and that's where I'm at. Now, you asked me at the beginning of this whole program about getting ready, and what are some things that we need to do. I mean, you mentioned jars, you mentioned your lids, and different things like that. You know, we are a big advocate of, based on everything we see going on around us, whether it be the electromagnetic reversal of our poles, or the sun going to sleep, or geoengineering, solar cycles, whatever we want to talk about here, it all comes down to one thing. You've got to have food, water, and warmth. That's the three things. If you don't have all those three things, any one of them can take you out of the picture. And this, if anybody takes anything away from mine in your talk today, I would want it to be the simple fact that it was talked about between the both of us that we covered those three areas. And a lot of people, they don't think about the simple fact that, oh, I'm not calling company names. I hate doing that because I don't want to do that. But I've got, I'm gonna use an MRE. Okay, we'll use an MRE. You know where I'm going with that. Foods that require water in order to be able to be used again. The dehydrated foods. People go, I've got tons and tons of dehydrated food stored up. I have no problem with that whatsoever. If you have a water source to be able to rehydrate and to use the things that you need. Water. People ask me all the time, Danny, I'm looking at a new place to buy. What is the most important thing on this piece of property that I need to look for? And I will tell them right off the bat, water.
Freshwater
If you
spring.
don't have water.
Freshwater spring, yes. Coming out somewhere, yeah.
Yes. Fresh water on that property. Do you have a well? Do you have a spring? Is there a creek? Is there anything on that property that's not tied to some massive plant somewhere where it's being, look upstream from you at least a 500 miles and see what's upstream from you. Check these things out, because in a disaster, let's just say you use the fact of what if we have another Carrington event or something like that happens, and which is very, very possible. The closer we get with these solar minimum, that kind of stuff, because we have no protection shield around the earth, it can take a smaller sun flare, can do the same exact thing that happened during the Carrington event. It doesn't have to be as massive, because all of our technology now is so sensitive. It can actually knock a lot of that stuff out. And if you have a major plant upstream from you somewhere and it gets took out, and there's no way to control what goes on in that plant, and it has the same effect as an EMP would have, and there's no electricity to control what goes on in that plant could easily intoxicate all the water coming down through an area like that. And your water source would be completely toxic at that point. And you would actually die from the water that you drank. That's why it's important. Have you some sort of a water filtration system? Have some sort of a way to produce your own food. You need a greenhouse. You need a way to store that food up. You need jars. You need the right kind of jars. There's different kinds of jars for acid foods. There's different kinds of jars for pressure canning. And you can have thousands of jars, which we have here at Deep South Homestead. We have thousands of jars. But if you don't have the lids to go with them, they're totally useless to you. So stock up on not just jars, but stock up on lids. When you buy a case of jars, buy 3 to 4 flats of lids to go with that case of jars, because it would get you 3 or 4 more cannings out of those jars.
What do you think about the reusable lids? Anything on that? I've seen Ball has some reusable lids as well. So I'm not curious if you use the reusable lids and if they're if they really work like they say they will. You can use them multiple times, or do you think that the one-time use is the best way to go?
Me personally, I do the one-time use. I tried the Tatler lids, they call them. It has the reusable ones. If those there is a art to putting those lids on. If you do not put those lids on exactly the way they're supposed to be put on, they will not hold a seal, and they will break on you. The seal will. And so for me, the price difference for just buying the regular lids. Now, we've learned we do not use the gold colored lids here at Deep South Homestead. We've learned that the gold colored lids will not hold up under our humidity and stuff. They begin to rust within a year. We strictly go with the ball lids, the silver ones. They seem to do better. We've even tried waxing the tops of our lids once we put them on jars here. It all depends on, that's a pro or a here and a there. You can do it if you want to. The thing about it is, it depends on just how long you plan on keeping that food before you actually eat it. If you're going to keep it for long periods of time, then sometimes waxing is a good idea. But if you're not planning on keeping it for long periods of time, which most people don't, they usually eat their food within the first year or so, then there's no need in doing the waxing. But we specifically use the ball lids. We just do the one-time lid. They're not that expensive right here. Now, different parts of the country, yes, some of the lids that we've heard in California are up to $5 and $6 a box of lids. Here, we're still paying around $2 in that ballpark range. And I really suspect that as soon as the powers to be realize that people are really beginning to stock up on these kind of things, they're probably going to be some sort of rationing on them also at some point, whether it's a cutback or whether it's the fact that you can only purchase so many at a time or whatever. I think that we're probably going to go down that road eventually. And people are going to have to learn. I tell people this on my channel. One of the survival things that you need to start buying now and stocking up is salt. You can buy salt in 50-pound bags for virtually a small amount of money. Every family needs at least 250 to 300 pounds of salt stocked up, because if you can't can, you're going to have to learn to preserve what you have through the use of salt and dehydration.
And that takes us back to the pioneering days and a pioneering lifestyle. How many people are ready for that? From 5G to a pioneering lifestyle in less than a day. Wow. Yeah, that'll be a quick transition.
Yeah, that's where the EMP thing's going to come in. If there was to be a Carrington event or an electromagnetic pulse, or just the simple fact that there are no more food on the shelves, something happens to stop the trucking industry, you're going to have maybe 2 to 3 days that you're going to have a transition period in 2 to 3 days if something stops trucks from rolling in this country.
Yeah, and hopefully be aware. All right, Dan, this brings us up to about an hour right now. We're going to stop right here. And before we go, I always like to give you last thought. And also, deepsouthhomestead.com. You're up on Facebook. You got the YouTube channel. You got that informative video series on the educational video series right there. When you come down in that, there's a whole bunch of selections of videos that you can watch, and it's easy to find that one. Educational videos, top right up there. And the selection of the squares when you're on the website there. Anywhere else that people can find more information? I mean, so far the website, YouTube, Facebook, any other places that you're hiding out that I don't know about?
No, that's pretty much it. Well, we have a 2020 gathering coming up in March. Just go check it out. It's on our YouTube. On our Facebook page. We are on Brighton. Some. We're not over there a lot. We're at Brighton a little bit. We're beginning to branch out into some different areas. We're on Patreon. We have a Patreon account. If people want to go to Patreon, it's a $3 tier. We're not charging much there, but I have more freedom to speak on Patreon than I do on YouTube. So if you want to hear some more in-depth stuff, you have to go over to Patreon, where I have a little bit more freedom to talk about things over there than I do here. You find out a little bit more about my personal thoughts on things as far as Deep South Homestead is concerned.
Excellent. Nice round out there. Yeah, and we see, and one last thing that'll go with all of this is the cherry on top, I guess. The communication lines of us like this, having an interview or being able to put this on YouTube in the future around 2022, 23, I don't think you're going to find this information, or maybe you will. maybe it's all that they need, voices like ours, to explain the grand solar minimum to other people. Maybe these channels will be left unmolested and just left out there to go and inform the people because the governments didn't. Who knows? But we can see all across the landscape, everything social media is being, well, censored at the moment. So wish you all the best of luck. Hope you got something out of our conversation. Remember, all the links are in the description box below. I'll link up Danny's channel here and the website and whatnot, so you can go get more information there. And tell us what you thought about the conversation as well down in the description box below, and we'll try to answer your comments as we get them in the next